Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep on a case that's straight out of a spy thriller. You know, the story of Robert Hanssen, one of the most damaging spies in U.S. history.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from a podcast interview with Eric O'Neill, the FBI operative who went undercover to catch him.
What makes this case so fascinating is that Hanssen wasn't some ideologue driven by, a cause. He wasn't even recruited. He volunteered his services to the Soviets.
It makes you wonder what would drive someone to betray their country at that level, right?
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack today. Like, how could someone seemingly ordinary with a family and a career become a high-level traitor?
Our source material comes from Eric O'Neill, who had a front row seat to this whole thing. Imagine you're 27 years old and your boss shows up on a Sunday morning with a top-secret mission. Go undercover and catch a suspected mole within the FBI.
Yeah, it's a scenario you can't really prepare for. O'Neill had to lie to his wife, telling her he was taking a computer job at headquarters.
And he didn't even know at first that Hanssen was the main suspect. Like, the FBI just told him to keep an eye on this guy. So every interaction they had, O'Neill trying to figure out, is this the guy? Is this the mole who's been leaking secrets to the Soviets for years?
That had to create an incredibly tense working relationship,
Yeah.
trying to earn Hanssen's trust while simultaneously looking for evidence against him.
Talk about pressure. So before we get into the how of Hanssen's betrayal,
Yeah.
we need to understand the what. Just how damaging were his actions.
We're talking nuclear war plans. Imagine having access to a detailed blueprint of how the U.S. would respond to a nuclear attack.
Yeah.
That's what Hanssen handed over. He also compromised the continuity of government plans, which basically outline what happens if the president and key officials are suddenly incapacitated.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the chaos that could cause?
He exposed U.S. assets in Russia, meaning people who were risking their lives to gather intelligence for the U.S. were caught and executed because of Hanssen's information. This wasn't just theoretical. His actions had real deadly consequences.
The impact was massive. It crippled intelligence gathering, eroded trust within the intelligence community, and had ripple effects on national security for decades.
And what's even more disturbing is that Hanssen wasn't driven by some grand ideology. According to O'Neill, his primary motivations were money and a deep resentment toward the FBI.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We often think of spies as being motivated by ideology or a warped sense of patriotism. But Hanssen's case suggests that personal grievances and even petty office politics can play a role in these high-stakes betrayals.
So how did he manage to operate undetected for so long? I mean, when Hanssen was finally arrested, his first question was, what took you so long?
That's a great question, and it highlights the FBI's blind spots at the time. For one, Hanssen was never polygraphed during his entire FBI career.
Wait, seriously?
Seriously. A major oversight, wouldn't you say? They also weren't properly auditing computer system access, which allowed Hanssen to walk in and steal sensitive information right under their noses.
So in a way, the FBI's own procedures made it easier for him to operate.
Exactly. It's a classic example of how organizations can become so focused on external threats that they overlook the potential for danger from within. They were so busy looking for Russian spies that they failed to see the one hiding in their own ranks.
Plus, there was this institutional bias. Like, they couldn't believe that one of their own, someone who had sworn to protect the country, could actually be the enemy.
That's a crucial point. It demonstrates how deeply held assumptions, even in organizations like the FBI, can blind us to potential threats. They simply couldn't fathom that one of their own could be capable of such betrayal.
And this was all happening during the dawn of the internet age. Like, technology was changing rapidly, but the FBI was slow to adapt.
That's right. And Hanssen, being a skilled programmer, exploited that gap to his advantage. He used his knowledge of the FBI systems to penetrate them, steal information, and even cover his tracks by accessing data from other agencies like the NSA and CIA.
So he was like a digital ghost moving through the FBI systems unseen, taking whatever he wanted.
Precisely. And this made it even harder to trace the leaks back to him because it looked like the information could have come from anywhere.
He was essentially the FBI's first cyber spy, which is chilling when you think about how much our world relies on technology today.
Absolutely, and that's something we need to explore further because Hanssen's case wasn't just about a single spy. It was a wake-up call, a preview of how technology would change the landscape of espionage forever.
And in a twist of irony, it was technology, even a simple piece of technology like his Palm Pilot, that ultimately led to his downfall.
Right. It's a reminder that even in an age of sophisticated cyber espionage, sometimes the most valuable intelligence is hidden in plain sight. And it takes sharp observation, a keen understanding of human behavior, and a bit of clever manipulation to extract it.
O'Neill noticed something about Hansen's routine that most people would have overlooked. He was meticulous with his Palm Pilot, always keeping it close, like it was his most prized possession.
And that tiny detail gave the FBI an opening, but getting their hands on that Palm Pilot without arousing suspicion was a challenge in itself.
They knew they couldn't just grab it. They had to use psychology to understand Hansen's personality and use it against him. They needed to figure out what made him tick.
They knew Hansen was proud, competitive, and disliked authority figures, so they concocted this elaborate plan to lure him away with a shooting challenge. It was brilliant, really.
It was like they were using his ego as bait. I bet those FBI agents weren't too thrilled about losing that shooting match, though.
Probably not. But while Hansen was busy trying to outshoot his colleagues, O'Neill and a tech team were racing against time to copy the data from his Palm Pilot.
I can only imagine the tension in that room.
It must have been incredibly nerve-wracking knowing that if Hansen returned early, their entire operation could be blown.
And he did return early. O'Neill had mere minutes to get that Palm Pilot back in place before Hansen realized anything was amiss. Talk about a close call.
It's a testament to O'Neill's quick thinking and ability to stay calm under pressure. He managed to pull it off, but then he had to face Hansen, who directly asked him, "Were you in my office?"
I bet his heart skipped a beat at that moment.
Absolutely. He had to maintain his composure, stick to his cover story, and deflect suspicion.
Knowing that everything was at stake. I don't know how he did it.
Well, that's what we're going to dive into next. The mental and emotional toll of undercover work, the cat-and-mouse game between O'Neill and Hansen, and ultimately how the FBI finally brought this master spy down.
So they had the data from the Palm Pilot, and that was it. That was the smoking gun.
Exactly. It gave them the evidence they needed to arrest Hansen and finally, dismantle one of the most damaging spy rings in U.S. history.
It's almost poetic justice that the very device he used to meticulously plan his betrayals became the instrument of his downfall.
It's a classic example of how, even in an age of advanced technology, seemingly simple tools can still play a crucial role.
And let's not forget the human element here. O'Neill's observations, his ability to build a relationship with Hansen while suspecting him all along, that was instrumental. It seems like he had to be part detective, part psychologist.
Absolutely. He had to constantly analyze Hansen's behavior, looking for clues, while simultaneously playing the role of a trusted colleague. It's a delicate balance requiring a deep understanding of human nature.
And all of that while keeping this huge secret from his wife. Can you imagine the toll that took on him?
Yeah, it's a side of espionage we often don't consider, the impact on the personal lives of those involved. O'Neill talks about the relief of finally telling his wife the truth, the emotional weight of those lies he had to carry for months.
It's a reminder that espionage isn't just about secrets and gadgets. It's a human drama with real-world consequences for everyone involved.
And those consequences extended far beyond O'Neill and his family. Hansen's arrest sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. The FBI had to face some hard truths about its own vulnerabilities.
You could even say that Hansen, in a way, forced them to become better.
That's an interesting perspective. O'Neill actually calls Hansen the modern architect of the FBI. It might sound counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Because he exposed their weaknesses.
Exactly. Hansen's case forced the FBI to confront its own flaws. The lack of polygraphs, the lax computer security, the institutional biases that blinded them to the threat. They had to revamp their procedures, implement stricter security measures, and address those deep-seated beliefs that one of their own couldn't possibly betray their country.
So in a twisted way, Hansen's betrayal ultimately led to a stronger, more secure FBI.
It's a classic case of learn from your mistakes. His actions, as devastating as they were, ultimately led to significant reforms.
But the story doesn't end there. O'Neill, after years of silence, decided to share his experiences in a book called Gray Day, My Undercover Mission to Expose America's First Cyber Spy. Of course, Hollywood turned it into a movie called Breach.
These adaptations brought the story to a wider audience, raising important questions about the evolving nature of espionage in the digital age. They show us that the methods might change, but the stakes remain incredibly high.
And they offer a glimpse into the personal side of this world. The pressure, the danger, the moral dilemmas faced by those who operate in the shadows.
It's one thing to read about espionage in a textbook. It's quite another to hear it from someone who lived it. O'Neill's account provides a raw, intimate perspective that you just don't get from official reports or dry historical analyses.
But even after writing the book and seeing his story on the big screen, O'Neill still had unresolved feelings. He wanted to confront Hansen directly to understand his motivations, to find some kind of closure. He even tried to visit Hansen in prison, but he was denied access.
Yeah, it's a common experience for those who have been betrayed. There's a natural desire to understand why, to get answers from the person who hurt you.
And tragically, Hansen died last year while serving his life sentence. So that opportunity for a final conversation, for O'Neill to get the answers he was looking for, it's gone forever.
It's a poignant reminder that sometimes closure remains elusive even after justice has been served.
But O'Neill found some solace in sharing his story, using his experience to shed light on the world of espionage. He turned a painful personal ordeal into a valuable lesson for us all.
It's a testament to his resilience and his commitment to using his experience to educate others about the dangers of insider threats and the evolving nature of espionage in a digital age.
So what are some of the key takeaways from our deep dive into the Robert Hansen case? It's a story full of intrigue, betrayal, and high-stakes chases, but what does it all mean for us, the listener?
For me, it highlights that espionage isn't just something that happens in movies or in far-off countries. It's a constant threat, and it can come from the most unexpected places.
It makes you wonder, could someone like Hansen exist today, even with all the advancements in security?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore further as we wrap up our deep dive into this complex and fascinating case.
Yeah, it is a chilling thought that even with all our security measures, someone could still be out there, hiding in plain sight, ready to exploit a weakness or slip under the radar.
And we can't forget the human factor. Technology can only do so much. It can't account for things like greed, ambition, or resentment. Those are the driving forces behind many betrayals. And as Henson's case shows, sometimes the biggest threats come from the people we trust the most.
It really challenges your assumptions about trust, right? You think you know someone, you work with them, maybe even consider them a friend, and then bam, turns out they've been living a double life, betraying everything you thought they stood for.
It's a stark reminder that we can never truly know what's going on inside someone else's mind. There could be hidden motives, secret resentments, or even just a simple lack of moral compass that we're completely unaware of.
So what's the takeaway here for you, the listener? Should we all be walking around suspicious of everyone?
I don't think it's about living in a constant state of paranoia. It's more about being aware, being observant, and maybe even a little bit skeptical. Not everyone deserves our blind trust.
It's like that old saying, trust but verify. But in today's world, that's easier said than done, especially when you're dealing with people who are skilled at deception, like Hansen was.
That's true. But there are things you can do. Pay attention to inconsistencies in people's stories. Notice if their actions don't match their words. Sometimes those small details, the things that seem insignificant, can be red flags, warning you that something isn't quite right.
It's almost like you have to become an amateur detective in your own life, constantly analyzing everyone around you.
Not quite, but it is about being more mindful, more aware of the potential for deception. Don't just blindly accept things at face value. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and trust your gut instincts.
Because, as we've seen from the Robert Hansen case, the cost of complacency can be enormous. Lives were lost, national security was compromised, and the trust in one of our most important institutions was shattered, all because one man decided to betray his country.
It's a sobering reminder that even the most ordinary-seeming person can be harboring secrets and ambitions. That could have far-reaching consequences. And in a world where technology makes it easier than ever to connect, communicate, and steal information, the potential for these kinds of betrayals is only going to increase.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Robert Hansen, the question remains, could someone like him exist today? Could they slip through the cracks, exploit vulnerabilities, and cause just as much damage even with all the security measures we have in place?
It's a question that keeps intelligence agencies up at night, and honestly, there's no easy answer. But by understanding the motivations behind these kinds of betrayals, by learning from the mistakes of the past, and by being constantly vigilant, we can at least try to minimize the risk.
Well said. It's a reminder that the fight against espionage, against betrayal, is never truly over. It's an ongoing battle that requires constant attention, adaptation, and a healthy dose of skepticism. And as we've seen from the Hansen case, sometimes the most important weapon in this fight is simply being aware that the enemy could be closer than you think. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.